Thanks for that great introduction, and thanks to everyone at NewMR for the opportunity to talk to all of you about my favourite topic and a personal passion, which is, of course, curiosity. So, over about 25 years working in insights and innovation for some of the world's biggest brands, I developed an ethos that drove me to establish Curioso. That ethos is that true and intentional curiosity drives real understanding, which in turn reveals meaningful opportunities. Now, many or most of you work in insights or research, so would probably consider yourself a generally curious person. It is, after all, a profession that attracts curious minds. But if you reflect on your last week or the last month, how often do you think you could say that you were truly and intentionally curious? Because there is a big difference between the general sense of being a curious person and actually behaving with true and intentional curiosity. Now, in the commercial world, the numbers suggest that we're not as curious as we would all aspire to be. According to an Australian study released by SAP in 2022, only 40% of leaders and 10% of employees in Australian companies believe that their leaders model inquisitiveness. And 2/3 suggest that talk about curiosity is not supported by actions in their company. Tellingly, while 85% of leaders say they encourage asking questions that challenge the status quo, only 56% of employees in the same companies find that to be the case. And a whopping 90% of employees believe that their manager could do a better job to facilitate a more curious culture. So it's clear leaders need to model and encourage true and intentional curiosity if it's indeed going to flourish. But unfortunately, a lot of our modern institutions actually go the wrong way, and they unintentionally dissuade people from behaving curiously. This all actually begins in school. 4-year-olds have been measured to be the most curious beings on the planet, and it's no surprise that at 5 years old, curiosity drops off, because kids start school and start being told there's right answers and wrong answers to most of their questions, and even being chastised when they're wrong. As one UK headmaster summed it up in a Guardian article, "School kills curiosity. When do children get to ask questions about things that interest them? As soon as they're at primary school, they have to shut up and learn. It's not the fault of teachers, they have so many targets to meet," he said. Now, couldn't that last statement be so easily reworded to apply to today's corporate environment? Companies kill curiosity. When do people get to ask questions about the things that interest them? As soon as they start work, they have to shut up and work. It's not the fault of managers, they have so many targets to meet. Which brings me to my main focus of today. In studying this space for some time, I found it's terribly rare to come across commercial leaders that have intentionally shut down curiosity. But it's also unfortunately rare to identify leaders that are intentionally fostering and encouraging curiosity through their actions. And curiosity, unfostered and untended, like a pot plant, withers and wilts. So while killing curiosity isn't always intentional, fostering it really must be. It has to be a commitment, it has to be visible, and it has to be in actions, not just words. So to help you foster curiosity in your organization, I've identified 6 facets of commercial life that can either foster curiosity or kill it. And as we go through, you can think about which side of each facet your company lies and consider what you might need to do to be sure that you are being more intentional about curiosity and doing that starting today. Let's start at the top with your company's values and beliefs. Now, I don't mean what's written in the annual report or is painted on the break room walls. I mean the real values and beliefs that people feel through the actions and language of your company from day to day. Let's start with 2 real curiosity killers when it comes to your values and beliefs. The first is a term I've coined called BATs, blindly accepted truths. Now, BATs are those unchallenged, institutionalized assumptions that maybe once were true, but shouldn't be guiding our business today. BlackBerry had a famous BAT that people absolutely prefer having a physical keyboard on a mobile device. We all know how that played out. You could also ask Kodak or Blockbuster or any number of others what happens when you build your business based on BATs. And don't be fooled, every organization has BATs, even yours. And the only way to get rid of them is to bring them out into the light of day. Now, in a strange perversion of biological evolution, bats sometimes actually begin as a hippo and can sometimes go on to become a sacred cow. Hippo, of course, is the highest paid person's opinion, and we've all been there, where insights lacking, opinions become currency, and the boss's opinion carries the most weight, even if they're not remotely connected to the target audience or even a category user. But if you let your hippo stampede your curiosity, you might end up solving your boss's problem, not a consumer's. And worse than a hippo are sacred cows, the unchallengeable eternal bats to so many businesses. If any brand or product or service line or idea in your business is seen as eternally perfect, immovable, or unchallengeable, why would anybody in the company risk their professional skin to curiously challenge it or question its relevance to today's consumer? We need to be aware of letting bats go so long that they reach this unchallengeable height of sacred cow. Instead, to foster curiosity, we need to focus on values like humility, curiosity, and a growth mindset, especially the humility and the associated courage it takes to say the hardest of all business phrases, I really don't know. The truth is, most of the time, we don't really know much at all. But in cultures where confidence and certainty are king, the pressure to know becomes immense, and people feel ashamed to have a knowledge gap, which when you step back and reflect, is quite ridiculous in the complex and rapidly changing commercial ecosystems in which we all work. No one can ever really always know. This is the antithesis of developing a growth mindset, which understands that we can continue to improve through humility and curiosity of what more there is to know. Now, connected to values and beliefs, we need to reflect on the everyday behaviors and style, especially leadership style, which are critical to fostering a curious culture. I believe we need to decriminalize doubt in the corporate world and encourage our teams to explore their doubts about our strategy, because they might reveal opportunities for us to improve our solutions, instead of convincing ourselves that the strategy we have is perfect. Many modern leadership behaviors, though, seem to criminalize doubt. Phrases you would have heard, like, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Or celebrating people that confidently deliver opinions with false certainty over those that raise doubts or generate what would be healthy uncertainty. Many leaders overly celebrate false confidence by heaping praise and new opportunities on those that project certainty, because that's the leadership style that so many people have had modeled to them. Instead, we need leaders to challenge the source and the basis for certainty, and provide space for those with doubts to share and explore them with the group. And when their doubt reveals opportunity or saves us from a mistake, you should be the first to applaud their stance and show trust in their doubt. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying doubt everything or never be certain, just that we need to recognize that doubt is as valuable as certainty in making smart decisions, and that we need to find the right balance in how we react to both of them and leverage them both for better decision making. So far, I've talked about some of the more cultural elements. So let's talk then about more organizational factors, starting with structure and its influence on curiosity, which can be both good and bad. A curious culture is one in which leaders throughout the structure seek not just answers, but also questions from their team to build a more complete understanding of the decisions they're faced with. If leaders demand only answers, the motivation of teams to be curious just dies on the vine. So leaders need to not just leave room for questions about their questions, but actually invite them. A hierarchical structure with too great a gap between the levels, that will just see hippos rule and bats restrict thinking. Whereas flatter structures can help build confidence to question the question given, as can the intentional creation of challenger roles within structures. Now, challenger roles are roles which provide interconnectedness within teams and departments, often with peers that don't have direct reporting relationships, and are set up to challenge each other to get the best outcome for the business. For example, the head of brands might need the head of insights to sign off on a creative brief before it goes to agencies. Or the analytics director might be a mandatory consult on all research design and proposals. Some intentional tension in structures for this purpose can actually encourage more curiosity, as well as more diversity of thought, and ultimately better, more complete understanding of problems, as people get the best out of each other through that healthy challenge. Now, we can't talk structure without talking process, as the two have to walk hand in hand. Process can be one of the easiest places to spot curiosity killers, and hopefully the most practical for many teams to change because it's less personal or feels less emotional. There's a few ways we can make our processes more fit for a curious culture. The hardest issue for many process engineers is making time for curiosity. I see many processes for things like strategy development or MPD models that operate on what I would call a NAN model. Everyone needs answers now. The problem is that the first answer is often not the right answer, and almost always not the full answer. Now, if we don't build processes that create time for finding the right full answers, we're always stuck acting on the first answers we have, which often isn't the smartest course of action. There are times when near enough is good enough, and maybe the risk of action is small, and we don't want to bog those times down. But often the risk is high, and we need to be wary of acting on the first available answer. And in those moments, before we worry about finding the right answer, we're often well served to ensure our process includes a step to ensure that we take the moment to question the question. That is, to be sure we understand the real problem before we can hope to know how to answer it. We should watch out for processes that jump to solution mode before we even know we've defined the right it to solve, to borrow a phrase from Alberto Savoia of Google. That's why human design processes like human-centered design all have a clear problem definition stage. Now, we don't need to build in much time up front to check if we're asking all the right questions, and it inevitably pays back on the back end. All right, so we get structure and process right, but now we also need people that are well equipped to make the process happen. So we need to start thinking about curiosity as a skill and work on developing and honing it as a capability, just the same way that many organizations talk about creativity or innovation. Because curiosity is trained out of us from childhood, many people have lost their curiosity muscle and need to do conscious training to build it back up, which requires awareness, coaching, training, and opportunity to try it out like any other skill. Importantly, true curiosity is more about developing a mindset and a mantra about being open, humble, sitting with doubt, and following a relatively organic path, more so than teaching a set of process skills that you tick off a checklist. The capability of curiosity is not about being able to just do the research or be able to complete the right forms in the right order to pass through the process. It's almost the antithesis of this. It's the ability to know, despite the checklist, when and whether you've developed a real understanding of a topic and when to continue being curious. And finally, for today at least, to foster curiosity, people need not just capability, but the inspiration to go do it. Organizations that focus on rewarding best practice problems, or that reward people that are great challengers or curious humans, will flourish much more than those that focus on the typical model of sharing best practice solutions, aka the right answer, and rewarding success outcomes only without recognizing the people behind the process to get there. That's not to say we shouldn't celebrate outcomes, but we should strive to recognize those people along the way that asked the right questions that got us here. It's like having awards that laud attackers and scorers in sport, but never recognizing the great defenders. Ask yourself, how does your company recognize curiosity in its existing reward and recognition structures? Does it at all? How should it? Because when curious humans see other people being recognized for their curiosity, they're much more likely to ask that game-changing question that's on their own mind. And you can look externally if you're not yet kicking goals on curiosity within your four walls. Who could you use as external examples of curiosity? Or who could you have talk to the team and inspire them to reignite their flair for curiosity? Sometimes people just need a spark to start the conversation because curiosity is, after all, something most of us understand on a basic level. Now, we've talked most of the time about companies and their responsibility for commercial leaders to foster and inspire curiosity today. But we can also all work on being more truly and intentionally curious on a personal level too. So, I want to end by encouraging each of you to try, through the end of this year or perhaps the start of 2023, to challenge yourself about being more curious. There's lots of things you might do, from simple to things that might be scary. So let me share some examples I like to try when I get stuck on the treadmill of delivery and need a top up on curiosity. Now, firstly, you could step back and identify a bat in your team or company, and then expose it by bringing it into the light in a team meeting or conversation. Similarly, you could try questioning the question next time you receive a need answers now request. don't start answering it until you've taken at least 10 minutes to make sure the question is the right question to solve the problem at hand. Just like we jump to the first answer, people often jump to the first question and are often really happy to have you sit down and refine it with them. You could also explore somewhere different. Shop in a different store or suburb, walk the dog at a different park, go to a different beach over the holiday break, or play a game you've never tried. As you do it, ask yourself, what do you notice that's different? What questions does doing that raise about your usual surroundings? Or one that I love, but that requires a modicum of discipline, is to try defaulting to don't know, just for a week. Tally how often you falsely jump in wanting to have the answer versus actually sitting with your doubt or considering the question for a moment. And how often does not knowing at first get you to a better place in the end? You can also lean into a blind spot. I was pretty terrible at the economics of the category in my old job, so I started hanging out with the RevMan team and ended up doing a 2-year stint in their team, where they also got to lean into a blind spot about human behavior. In short, I'm challenging you to not just think of yourself as a curious person, but to go and be curious, truly and intentionally, which means you need to go out and actually behave curiously. Because if we can all do that honestly and intentionally, then we might just open a world of opportunity in work and in life as truly curious humans. Thanks for your time today.